Welcome, one and all. New listeners, loyal followers, I appreciate you. I'm Dr. David Hopkins, your host and guide in our collective journey towards intellectual freedom. As in this series, we're taking on thinking and how to improve it, trying to move from thinking short thoughts to longer thoughts, which isn't easy in our world today as the brain rot of where we spend our mental energy today is real and is happening to our society today. And what we are all about in this series is reading slowly, breaking down things. So I'm pumped to take on this new series. In our first book, we are breaking down Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. So let's not waste any time and let's just dive right into it. You know, somewhere between scrolling, streaming, swiping, we lost something. We lost the ability to sit still with a thought, to hold an idea long enough to feel it burn. Be honest. Do you have a boss, a friend, a family member that, my goodness gracious, has literally no ability to slow down, ponder, analyze, decipher before they form an opinion? I think we all have those people in our lives. Hopefully not too many, but we all have them. And we should all wonder, although we often don't, where in the world did this come from? So Neil Postman saw this trend, saw it years ago, almost 40 years ago now, and he said this: we are a people on the verge of amusing ourselves to death, hence the title to his book. Turns out, we didn't just stop at being on the verge of amusing ourselves. We built a full-size house there, Wi-Fi included. Heck, we jumped in so far into the hole of amusing ourselves to death that it's hard to even think about finding our way out as a society. So today, let's start to try to figure this thing out. Why? Why are we shallow, superficial, silly, ridiculous, emotional, and just over the top crazy in so much of our decision making? It just seems we're there. And so this week we're diving into the first 3 chapters of Amusing Ourselves to Death, which I mentioned in the last podcast. And we're asking a hard question. What happens to truth, to meaning, to freedom when the way we communicate has changed? Because in the last few decades, if they've taught us anything, it's this: technology doesn't just change what we say or how we say it. It changes who we are and how we think. I want to say that again because I need you to get this out of the gate about this book. Technology doesn't just change what we say, it changes who we are as people. So what do you think? Is technology making us smarter, if I would ask you that? Is it making us better informed? Is it making us better thinkers than we were? Are we better at uncovering truths? Better at having a dialogue and conversation when we disagree? Are we better at uniting people? What do you think? It's almost rhetorical at this point based on the way most people perceive individuals they don't agree with. Is technology making us a better version of ourselves? A better version of humanity? I'm going to leave that for you to stew on just for a moment. But let's do this. So what's the point here? Why does any of this matter? Because, as Portman talks about, if the medium or the tool that we use to communicate reshapes how we think, then our very capacity for critical thought, democracy, deep human connection is on the line right now. We can't underestimate how the tools created by technology shape so much more than the superficial stuff, like ordering some groceries from Amazon and seeing them show up at our doorstep 3 hours later. It's much, much deeper than that. Think about it. If we don't see the stage when we go to a play, we can't question the performance. And if we can't question the performance, we then become part of the show. So I want you to slow down one moment, see the stage, question the performance, so you're not participating in this show. What I want to do first is let's unpack Postman's biggest idea from the outset of this book. The medium is the metaphor. The medium is the metaphor. Sounds real academic, right? But it's actually pretty simple. A medium is just the tool that we use to communicate. It could be speech, our verbal give and take. It could be our writing. It could be television. It could be TikTok. It could be a book. A metaphor is what that tool teaches us about life and thought. So when Postman says the medium is the metaphor, what he's really saying is the form of communication in which we engage with each other, it carries a meaning all of its own. It decides, actually, the medium decides what kinds of thoughts are even possible. Think about it. Think of a handwritten letter that you write. If you ever write them anymore, and some younger generation, like, what are you even talking about writing letters? Handwritten letter, it's very slow, it's very intentional, it's very reflective. Now think of the text message. If you choose just to communicate in a text message, it's quick, it's casual, it's often reactionary, might have memes, might have pictures. The same person conversing with two different mediums, it completely can change the depth of the conversation. The form changed from writing a letter to writing a text, but the message changed. But then zoom that out even further. How the technologies and the mediums change how we perceive things at a very deep level. For example, take a clock. We all have a clock or a watch or our phone. We look at the clock all the time. Try and think of a time during any day that you've been alive that you don't pay attention to what time it is. At least a few times a day. You know, before that mechanical clock emerged on the scene, 13th, 14th century, people measured time differently. They measured it by the sun. They measured it by the seasons. They measured it by bells on a church tower. But then in that 14th century, the clock arrived. And suddenly time wasn't lived, it was counted. Minutes, seconds, hours, days, weeks, years, schedules. We became timekeepers. Then all of a sudden we had to be worried about time saving or being time savers, being efficient with our time. And now finally where we're at, we are a slave to time. See how that medium, that technology, that innovation completely shifted our perspective of life. Work shifted from the rhythm of nature to the rhythm of machines attached to your body. Life was carved into units of productivity. Every second of every day had a determined value. That time going tick tock, tick tock. I'm being paid to work. This is my time to sleep. I'm now on break. Ooh, I'm young. Ouch, I'm middle-aged. Oh my goodness, I'm old and I'm going to die. What isn't measured in your life now by a 24-hour clock? At least in the West, and most certainly in America, the clock didn't just measure time. It changed what life meant. And that's Postman's point. Each new medium that we introduce into the world, it can create an entirely different worldview, an entirely different perception of things. Writing taught us patience and memory. Printing taught us sequence and reason. Television taught us amusement. The internet taught us speed. And social media taught us performance. It's not that one is evil. It's that each one has a cost. The cost of the screen, of the TV screen or the computer screen is depth of thought. Does an utterly decaying political system contribute to the rot or the decrease in our ability to think deeply? Yes, of course it does. Does a corrupt and money-focused media contribute? Yes, of course it does. Does a school system that's just not doing what it's supposed to do lead to our brain drain? Yes, of course it can. But here's the kicker. You and I together, are a function of the mediums that we use. We think at the complexity level of where we spend our brain power and our leisure time. So when you live in a world of pictures, words lose weight. When everything must entertain, nothing challenges us. The medium becomes the metaphor, and eventually the metaphor becomes the mind itself. This was Portman's fear, and it has come to life. That's why this matters. Because the way that we talk becomes the way that we think. And the way that we think becomes the kind of people we will become. And let's be honest, it isn't real pretty right now when we look out at our cultural landscape. All right, let me just do a quick recap for those of you. Let's shift gears on you real quick and just run this through, because if you're reading along, this is for you, just to kind of keep everybody on the same page. But we did chapters 1 through 3 last week, and this week I challenge you, keep going. We're knocking out chapters 4 through 6, and that's what I'll be talking about in the next podcast. But like I said in the last episode, challenge you, I dare you to try and read through this book along with me. Mentally power your way through it, get through it. But if you haven't read the book and you're just tuning in like, well, I guess I should give up. No. I'll get you where you need to go. And you can still grab the depth from this. Consider this like your Cliff Notes version. But in Portman's book, chapter 1, he really talked about every form of media, from writing to TV. It reshapes how we define truth. Postman especially focused on the clock and the alphabet early, to show how technology doesn't just store info, it rewires how we experience reality. And we need to understand this, especially in the age we're living in, where it's TikTok, it's YouTube, it's TV, it's Twitter world. It matters. That medium matters. And then chapter 2, he talked about media as an epistemology. And a big word alert here, epistemology just means how we know what we know. In a print world, truth had structure, argument, evidence, logic. In a television world, truth became style, emotion, appearance, speed. And now in the digital world, truth is whatever grabs the most attention within the span of a couple seconds. It's that quick. Then chapter 3, Portman goes into what's called typographic America. That in Portman's world, this was kind of the highlight of human thinking. It was the 18th century America, built on reading. People devoured things like pamphlets and debates. Tocqueville said, America cannot converse, but it can discuss, meaning Americans didn't chit-chat back then. They reasoned out loud, as if in dissertation form. Print culture demanded patience, focus, logic. You know this when you read, right? It's slow, it's deliberate. Everything our current age seems allergic to. And today, well, we've gone from reading the Federalist Papers to commenting on TikToks about them. We've turned public discourse into a fast food drive-through for ideas. You pull up, you order your headline, and 20 seconds later, you're outraged, you're on your way to the next. So the depth of depth, that's a hard one to say, the death of depth didn't happen in just one headline. It happened incredibly slowly. And that happens when you get these changes slowly like this. A lot of times you don't catch it. And basically our attention has been sold off one notification at a time. See, when the print ruled the world, thinking took time. It was sequential. It was earned. It required deliberation. And let's face it, reading and writing are hard or harder. And as our medium shifts, as we really get into the next episode, we are slowly losing the capacity to slow down and think. Now we consume ideas like junk food, high calorie, low nutrition. News becomes entertainment. Politics becomes theater. Education became a game show. And if you believe you're educating yourself on world news by watching TV news now, I don't know how to say this very politely. You're just kidding yourself. You're kidding yourself. You're not educating yourself watching the nightly news. Pew Research actually did some research on TV news and discovered the typical story segment runs barely 1 to 2 minutes long, with some live reports or anchor voiceovers shrinking that to under a minute. Producers keep these segments short because the model is built around keeping viewers tuned in, because our attention span is short, and the industry has discovered that jumping to the next visual punch maximizes ad revenue because you stick around longer. If it's too slow and boring, you're going to flip the channel. It has to be short. It has to be superficial. It has to be visual, because if it isn't, the audience leaves and the TV stations lose money. The medium of TV is built around short attention span and visual imagery. Think about it. Really, it is. It's absurd to treat very complex topics, political systems, education reform, cultural identity, government shutdowns, as though they can be fully addressed in 60 seconds or less. Come on now. Do you think you are really educating and understanding a topic, a complex topic, in a segment of 16 to 120 seconds? I argue it's the opposite. If you tune into your favorite cable TV show, don't care if you watch Fox, CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, doesn't matter. You're not getting educated. You're actually brain dumbing down your mind as you're eating only fast food, sugar rush ideas that are feeding your bias. And if you don't believe, I don't care which channel you watch, that you're not just feeding, they are not just giving you exactly what you want based on the channel. The producers, the networks know who's watching, and they are giving you exactly what you want to hear in tiny, silly, superficial bites. Nuance, historical context, deep thinking, they don't show up. And they wouldn't make the newsroom floor, and they wouldn't make a good headline clip. In other words, the conversation in our electronic media is literally designed to be shallow. It wasn't ever meant to be sophisticated, nuanced, and detailed. And so it's no surprise that if TV or the internet is where we are getting public discourse, we cannot be shocked when the people that consume it become shallow. Let's talk just scientifically on this for a minute. Researchers at the University of Washington and MIT both have shown that reading on paper activates more brain regions tied to comprehension and empathy than reading on screens. Print reading builds neural deep reading. Networks inside of your brain connecting reasoning, memory, and imagination get fired up when you read a old school book. Screens, TV, they favor speed, recognition. You skim, you click, you glance, you half listen. Another study from the American Psychological Association found our average attention span has dropped by almost 40% in 2 decades. 40%. Remember that part? Change the medium, you change the person. It's not just a technology tool. It literally impacts the way that we as human beings engage with content, how we think, how we learn. Heavy screen use increases impulsivity, reduces our brain's capacity for sustained focus. So what do we do about it when a society stops thinking deeply? I mean, three things collapse when this happens. One, short thinking becomes default. We react instead of reflect and listen. We confuse speed with wisdom. Two, public discourse becomes theater. Truth becomes a prop, and whatever performs best wins. Whatever performs best wins. Most people just don't think they can find truth out there anymore. And you know what? Whether you're on the left or the right and you think it's hard to find truth, you are absolutely correct, because the mediums that we're using to get our information from are shallow. They're reactionary. They're passionate. And so anger boils, anxiety skyrockets. The third thing, personal growth stalls. Here's the truth. I struggle with it, and you probably do too. If you don't slow down your brain and get off of those mediums that only encourage short-term thinking, you will never see things clearly. Because if you skim through things, half listen to things, don't get into the nuance and the depth of problems, your growth is going to stall. It's just going to happen. And that's the real tragedy. When our minds become addicted to amusement, freedom can die, not by force, but by fatigue. So what do? We start small. We start things like this podcast and many others out there. I mean, really, I'm not breaking new ground here. None of this is revolutionary. Yet it isn't what is driving conversations in society today. Our literacy rates are falling, and our students are getting worse and worse at writing and reading. They can't handle long thoughts very much without aids. So we need to take back our attention. And we do this by reading something that refuses to be skimmed. Read something that you can't just superficially get immediately, and it's fun. Something that requires you to slow down and read, maybe more than once, maybe twice. Write something down long enough to force clarity. Maybe journal, maybe take notes on the book that you're reading. I am doing this myself as I'm reading through Portman. Have conversations that aren't just a performance. Freedom begins there. Your long thought brain functionality begins there. In the discipline of deep thinking. You know, in a world that worships speed, slowness is not fashionable. Kind of makes you weird in a sense, but in a very good way if you really want to get my opinion on it. In a world that worships noise and speed, silence and deliberate, calm mind is a huge form of freedom. Because if the medium shapes the mind, then your mind is worth shaping on purpose. Take the medium of a book, buy one, put it in your hands, and every day or a few times a week, sit down quietly with no noise and no distractions and read. And I don't want to jump too far ahead of myself here, but I want to lay the groundwork for what's to come in this next era. Next week, we're gonna leave this thing of typographic America, and we're gonna enter the age of show business, where basically truth competes and becomes ultimately a circus. But I need to end here because, I mentioned Typographic America, and I haven't touched on this when I went over the summary of the first three chapters. But you need to get Typographic America before we leave it so you can appreciate more deeply the TV side. So to wrap up what we covered so far in a nice little bow, when Neil Postman talks about typographical America, he's describing a time in American history, as I mentioned, 18th, 19th century, that the written word shaped how people thought, learned, communicated. It was a print-based culture. The printing press came around in the 14th century. By the 18th, 19th century, it was full-blown spinning left, right, and center, meaning most public conversation. This is before we had electronic communication. It was way in its infancy, reading and writing. Books, pamphlets, newspapers, written out debates, speeches that people actually read in full. In typographic America, words carried authority. Reading was how you participated in society. If you wanted to persuade, you needed logic. If you wanted to learn, you needed patience and reading. And the key characteristics of a typographic America, the good stuff in a good way, depth over speed. People took the time to think through arguments. There's stories of Tocqueville talking about how crazy it is how many hours Americans would spend reading. Reason over emotion. The printed word encourages logic and structure and evidence, not just feelings or appearances. The visual imagery that we get in the TV and internet later is very emotional. Typographic America, the exact opposite. We had reason over emotion, patience and focus. We know it. You know it. Reading long passages will train your attention and build mental endurance. You know it. I do it myself. I'll be reading, all of a sudden I get all sleepy, or it's like, whoa, what was I reading? I was just kind of randomly there. It takes focus. It takes patience. Public literacy. Ordinary citizens read widely, even complex political, philosophical writing. And this made democracy stronger. Shared discourse. Ideas spread through essays and letters and debates that valued clarity and truth, not just entertainment. In short, this typographical America was a time when reading shaped reasoning. The mind was trained to follow long arguments, spot contradictions, understand nuance. Postman saw and knew that as it was the golden age of thought. But he warned that once the image replaced the word, our ability to think deeply would begin to fade. And like all great things, this era of typographical America fades. And it fades into an era of new media. First, we got a telegraph, very short messages spread over time and space. Then we get to the TV and the age of show business. And that's where we're going to pick up. So bring your popcorn skepticism next week. And I think your eyes will be open as to just how deep the clutches of short-term thinking are rooted in us in this incredible new discovery that burst onto the scene like almost nothing else, electronic communication. And the star of the show, when it first showed up, was TV. And that's where we're going to go next week. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. And if this resonated with you, share it, comment, subscribe on whatever platform you listen. Here's the deal. We need more and more people to reflect on what is going on in our world, to think, to question, to rebel against this sugar-coated nothingness because it's dividing us. It's stoking anger. And we as a people are going to have to try and tamp this down. If not for society as a whole, at least in your own life. So I hope you'll join me for the next episode on Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Portman. Chapters 4 through 6 is where we're going next week. And if you want to keep reading along and stay on track with us, that is awesome. But until then, have yourself a wonderful week.